Like, I'm not trying to start a revolution. I'm just trying to say, hey, I was here, I documented this. I mean, art is like, it's a post-toil activity, you know? I think that that is a more effective way of displaying an emotion than it would be to display happiness on a canvas. I mean, this last series that I'm still actually working on, these pieces here, this is a death rattle of the American Romantic, death rattle of the French Romantic, death rattle of the German Romantic. Essentially, this concept of the fleeting, and whether it's real or not, but it's certainly affecting a multitude of different people's, the way people vote, the way people kind of get behind their country. It's certainly affecting a lot in this country. It's certainly affecting a lot within Europe. This concept of the culture, like a culture lost, right? Okay. So essentially, like the culture itself, the romanticized culture itself, is on life support. So all these scenes are playing out in these hospital spaces, okay. Which is also applicable to I personally went through cancer treatment last year, and spent a lot of time in the healthcare system, the hospital, and dealing with all that and getting chemo, and obviously doing better now. Obviously very happy about being alive and feeling better. But it is sort of this insight of fragility that you sort of go through, okay. Mm-hmm. And then applying them to a kind of a bigger idea, one that I can be less personal about. Right. Yeah, I can. I think it was at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. They had there's a portrait that Rembrandt did. Portrait of a woman. There was something like very maternal about the woman. And she kind of she didn't look like my mother, but kind of reminded me of her a little bit. And I thought like that the capability of a piece of art to have an emotion like that translate to somebody, 400 years later. I can't think of a distilled expression, an artistic movement, that for me is any more important than that. I mean, art is like, it's a post-toil activity. Like we live in a world where we have a lot more options on what we do with our time. So I think art is a very valid activity to confirm what it means to be here, what it means to be human. And also through the process of doing that activity, you can hopefully glean some sense of happiness from the process, right? Because, I mean, the alternative of what you do post-toil is, you could watch a bunch of content, you could watch a bunch of movies, and you could play a bunch of video games. I think it also plays to, it's this sense of like wanting to encapsulate what you've learned and tell a story and do it in almost a passive, provocative way, and I think that by making a painting, it will always find its audience. If you've truly championed some sort of emotion and you've been able to put that into an object and you've been able to imbue it with that like power and strength, like, I mean, I'd be very satisfied if I made at least a couple of those within a lifetime. I think that's why I continue to do it. It's never been like really an option not to. It's weird with the identity as being an artist and thinking in terms of the story you can tell, and being like a white male in a situation where it's like I want to make work that like I know that I in this time period am never going to be removed like as a person, and I think it kind of occurred to me that like I should focus on things like history, things that I really love and get behind. I think this series encapsulates this weird cross section between having a museum experience where I get to react to paintings, right? It also checks a box of like presenting something that I think is really very much happening during this time period politically, where people are really getting very defensive about what the idea of their country is, you know, and obviously that's getting really disrupted by, you know, global economies and getting really disrupted by immigration, getting really disrupted by the fact that, you know, parts of the world aren't livable anymore, you know, so then they got to go somewhere else. You're seeing it everywhere. And I think European culture is interesting because it has this age of colonialism that, you know, obviously a lot of the world is not excited about, you know, and even people within the countries themselves are like, yeah, it's good we got away from that. We want to downsize. Like, we want to pull out of areas. We shouldn't be meddling with all these different places. So I feel like it, without trying to put forward an opinion, because I don't want to, that's not what's important, right? My opinion isn't really important. What I'm trying to state is more like a simple fact of, you know, everything's a little sick right now, right? I'm trying to figure out ways of using this language from these paintings, this kind of like romantic language, and then trying to run it up against the experience that I got from, you know, just also being sick. Good question. I think that people love a good story, like a Van Gogh, right? Like a Van Gogh, he could paint a landscape that seems slightly tormented, but because there's these stories out there about like him being so tormented, he cut his ear off and gave it to a prostitute friend of his, and you know, just like all that stuff. Like if he just painted a beautiful picture that didn't have any weird impending sense of torment, you know, there wouldn't be that same sense of like narrative that would be applied. It's all very dark and intense, and I think that artwork, it doesn't have to be brooding, it doesn't have to be sad all the time. I mean, there's plenty of happy work that is not, but I do think that having a piece, having an object in front of you that is brooding, where you can access that emotion, like in kind of in a second-hand fashion, being the viewer, and you don't have to deal with that emotion, like because it's legit happening to you, but you can kind of look at it from afar. I think that that is a more effective way of displaying an emotion than it would be to display happiness on a canvas. Because people want happiness, but they want actual happiness.